as I've shared before, my goal and my mission and why I believe I was put here for this work was to work in our Native communities and to help us go from dealing to healing as it relates to trauma. Last week, we talked about personal tools when it comes to even just COVID season. We started very immediate. Here's what's happening today in our world. Here's what's happening in your house. And so we talked about that a little bit last week and kind of looking forward. So what I get to borrow you for, I think 3 more sessions. And I just want to keep digging in and expanding and sharing as much information as I can in our time together. And yet not making it extremely boring or anything. I want you to keep coming back. So that'll be good for both of us. So one of the things that I always talk about when it comes to trauma, and I'll just call it trauma for now. I think ultimately I'd like to call it overwhelm. Overwhelm stored in our bodies for the purposes of survival. Ultimately, I'll say that as often as I can, just so we don't have to get stuck on that word trauma. It doesn't change the meaning or anything about what happened, but it reclaims the narrative. It makes me in charge of how I'm going to talk about it. It makes the person sitting in my office in charge of that narrative. And so if they want to say trauma, okay, more power to you. But if they say, if it's the same thing as overwhelm stored in our body, then let's look at tools to get rid of how overwhelm is stored in our body. Because in our communities, it looks like a lot of unhealthy stuff. My community here, I go out there quite a bit. My wife's community in Arizona, it looks like a lot of unhealthy stuff. And we'll unpack all of this stuff, but I want us to get kind of the same foundation of understanding it over the next 3 weeks. And our bottom line is, I want us to be sovereign. As I've said this before, and I'll say it again, is sovereignty in our communities is we're in charge of our ceremony and our language and finances and culture, things like that. That's being sovereign as a community. And what I want is for us to feel sovereign in our own skin, for me to know what it feels like to be in charge of myself in this moment. That's sovereignty. And I have 3 chocolate kids at home, Gracie, Parks, and Jack, that Daddy Bear, my role in their life is to teach them how to be strong, sovereign individuals. So when things come along in their lives, they have sovereign capacity to make decisions on them, not just react to them, not just give what's handed to them. And what happens with traumas is the world goes from here, this big broad base, to it shrinks and it shrinks and it shrinks and it shrinks. And between us, trauma's kind of a jerk. It wants to limit us. Trauma's end game is for us to be in our bedroom with the lights off, under the covers, nursing a beer. That's what it wants. To limit. And I look at my 3 little chocolate kids at home and I want expansion. I want expansion, empowerment. And I see you, and that's what I want for you. That's what I want for the community. I go to Rosebud a lot, and that's what I want for those people I see there. I come to my res here, that's what I want. And so it's going to start with, how do me in my own skin, start addressing this? And I don't want us to get caught saying it's up to the kids to do this. It's up to me to do this. My kids are going to learn this from me. They're going to learn safety. They're going to learn strength. They're going to learn empowerment from me. And so I can't sit back and hopefully they catch on. How Creator put us together, they even have something called the vagus nerve that does this and measures how safe their environment is. And once they see that Dad responds in good ways, in safe ways, in strong ways, their own physiology changes for empowerment. And we have the capacity to change ourselves, our families, our clans, our community, our res. It just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And here's something really cool is, well, this is all as exciting, but how do we change the whole community? There's so many of us. But it only takes, now hear me say this, are you ready? It only takes 9% of a population to start the change. 9% of a population. So my res here has about 1,500 people living on it. 9% would be about 130 people out of 1,500 to start turning that. And you know what? I'm related to that 130. So I'm covered. I'm invited over for dinner and we'll start this thing here. But you guys in your homes, there's 130 right there. So we have the capacity, just that we can't assume it's going to happen. It's not going to happen by accident. We're not going to hope it happens and it'll occur. It occurs with us being diligent and vigilant and having to go across multi-generations over time. I'm gonna say that again, that's not smart. We'll have it go across multi-generations over time. It can't be an event, because an event by definition has a beginning and a middle and an end, and then it's over. It can't be an event. It's got to be a way of being. And for me to affect things that my descendants are going to experience, the way we are being today can shift and change, and that trickles down generationally. So that's what our conversations are going to be. I'm going to talk about how things are affected generationally. I'm going to talk about the DNA of trauma and hurt, and the DNA of good things that are passed down as well. And I say these things at the beginning because I just want us to get excited about stuff. I truly want us to get excited about this. So I'm going to dive in and, man, just lean into it and let's make good things happen. Okay. So I chose, well, I didn't want my work to be about trauma, but I kept seeing folks that I can go on any res and our rates of everything you don't want to have are elevated. Diabetes, cancers, autoimmune diseases, lupus, arthritis, and those are physiological things. That doesn't include the alcoholism rates and the drinking and things like that, and smoking, things like that. That's just the physiological things. And I began this probably 15 years ago. I thought, why the heck is that happening so much? Oh, it's 20 years ago already. Like my res here, that little yellow sign, the little green sign that says, welcome to the Tuscarora Reservation. As soon as you cross that line, you can feel your arteries clog. And then you go off the res and your blood sugar goes down. Something occurred. And I thought, well, maybe it's the water, or maybe it's electricity, or something's going on. And I kept, with all the research, it wasn't statistically significant, wasn't significant. And then I kept coming back to that word trauma. And I didn't want it to be trauma because I didn't have the right tools for that. But that's what it kept coming back to. So then I wanted to see, well, what is trauma? Why are we calling it trauma? What are we labeling trauma? I wanted to get to know it. And I wanted to see how it works and what functions it has, because it was decimating our communities with addictions and suicidal ideation and obesity. And I thought, all right, let's go punch it in the nose. And to punch it in the nose, I wanted to know what it was about. I don't want to be its buddy. I wanted to say, well, how do you're not welcome. You're not welcome in my home. You're not welcome in my community. So I want to know what it was. And I'm going to spend tonight just kind of getting that foundation of just what is it? Okay. Again, let me reemphasize what I'm down with. I think culture and ceremony are awesome, and the healing capacities of prayer and the spirit, I am totally into that. The things that I've seen it do. But I want you guys to put it through that filter there in your own homes or in your own minds as you're watching this. Because I can't say from Tuscarora, New York, here's how you need to do it in Rosebud, or Nez Perce. I can't say that, but I want you to put it through those filters that I'm talking about. And actually, I might tie it in directly when you start talking about the vagus nerve. I might start talking about that directly, as how culture affects it in good ways. But let's get our foundation first. Okay. So how am I skip this stuff here? Let's just do this. Let's just do this. We're electrical. How we are put together, how Creator said, I'm gonna make those little chocolate buggers run around on Earth. I'm gonna make them electrical. And that's how we are. Okay, check this out. I got a toy here. Here's my toy, my favorite toy. If you guys weren't watching, I would probably be sitting here just looking at it and drooling. I probably do that because it blows my mind. I'm electrical. When I do this, my electrical current does that. You remember we talked about this? Okay. So if I handed this to Annie, she'd touch it and it wouldn't make any noise until she and I touched hands. And then it would light up because electricity needs a closed circuit for it to do this. So I started reading up on that electrical current. And it's on miles and miles of cable, and it bounces around us just south of the speed of light. Just south of the speed of light. And it goes where you need it to go. So, like, the fact that you're thinking right now is that electrical current, is a neurochemical impulse that goes to a thinking part of your brain, and you're having a thought. It's unbelievable how we're put together. The genius, the masterful genius behind how we're put together. Everyone wiggle your toes right now. Are you wiggling your toes? Okay. How does that happen? How did you have a thought and then your toe wiggled? It is unbelievable. Let it blow your mind when you're trying to sleep tonight. Okay. So what happens is this electrical current just south of the speed of light bounces around. I have a neurochemical impulse, goes to a nerve, goes to a muscle, and I can move my toe. Cool? Cool. So here's what happens is this same thing, when we have a traumatic event or a traumatic season like COVID in our lives, an ongoing stress like that, that same thing, that electrical charge gets stuck in the stress parts of your brain, which are back here. Here's your thinking part. Now I'm gonna, that's my goal for tonight, is just to unpack that part right there. I'll do that now, just so I have time to unpack things. Okay. That electrical charge feels a certain way in us. It makes our heart beat fast. It makes our breathing shallow. It makes us hot. It makes our pancreas shut down because our body understands glucose as energy. Pancreas controls that. So it says, let's shut that down and give more glucose so our blood sugars are running higher when we're stressed. And it feels like this. And we call it trauma. What this feels like, we call trauma. And then what happens is it feels like this a lot, all the time, and we don't have internal tools to address it. So what we start doing is we start using an external tool for my internal event. This thing that I have here, I can't control it. It keeps me awake. It makes me angry. It feels awful. And for that little while when I'm drinking, I don't feel so awful. Or smoking, or eating, or hitting, or using. So we're using an external tool for internal events. There is our roots of addictions in our communities. So what we can do is access the internal tools for the internal events. This heart pounding that we've labeled depression, anxiety, stress, trauma, all these things that we've labeled it. And you're going to find by the time we're done with our series here that we've had these things all along. We've had these tools all along. We just need to use them. We need to access them. So trauma then is more than an event. The event is over. It's the trauma that is stored in me now. The event is over. The trauma is stored in me. What does that mean? When I work with students, the one's crawling under a desk screaming, totally in overwhelm. Maybe he was hit before school. And maybe he'll be hit after school. But right now, it's 11 o'clock and it's not occurring. The event is over. But the body is not convinced of it. The body bears the burden of that. So it feels like it's happening over and over and over again. Obviously, it's not. But hear me say this. Are you ready, my friends? Trauma does not live in the logic parts of the brain. It doesn't live in logic. Do you know somebody who has anxiety attacks? Raise your hand if you know somebody who has anxiety attacks. Okay. Is it all the same person? I'll assume it's different people. You're not just hanging out with that crazy person in Rosebud. I'll say it's all different people. And when they're in the middle of their anxiety attack, do you say something like, why don't you just calm down? You ever thought about just calming down? Does that work? No. I'll punch you in the throat. Because when you say things like, why don't you just calm down? Listen to that. Just that phrase, why don't you calm down? Or, hey, just calm down. It sounds like you think they have a choice. Do you think they're choosing their anxiety attack? And what it is almost universally, there's some sort of smoking gun somewhere where their body stored that for the purposes of survival. Listen to this. Your friend's anxiety attack is their body thinking it's doing them a favor. But they're in the Walmart parking lot, or they're in a movie, or they're driving the car. And this sparks up. And because their brain detected something that could be a threat. And so it said, I'm going to do you everything you need. I'm going to give you everything you need to get out of here to survive. So listen to this. Let's just pare this down to what it is. It's their body feeling like it's running or feeling like it's fighting, but they're sitting still. So we call that an anxiety attack. Think about when you run. Your heart beats fast, you're hot, you're breathing heavy, you're sweaty. I just described an anxiety attack. Think about when you're trying to fight something back. You're tight, you're tingly, you're hot, you're sweaty. I just described an anxiety attack, but you're fighting something. So it's your body, listen to this. That anxiety attack, what we call trauma, is the body trying to finish something that started a long time ago. With that little boy under the desk, it's probably long standing, but his most recent event was this morning. And his body's trying to finish it. And in our schools today, or in our communities, it looks like ADHD, exactly like ADHD. It can look like autism. It looks like learning disabilities. It looks like addictions. So what we want to is pare that down to that person's not crazy or ruined or broken. Their body's just been built to survive. Think on that for a second. They're not crazy or ruined or broken. Their body just been built to survive. And they haven't had the tools to tell the body, thank you for your service, but I don't need that anymore. That's where we are now. And there ain't no shame in my game. I mean, we're not going to say, well, here's all this stuff that you screwed up. Nope, here's where we are now, and here's what we can do about it. It's almost 2021 in Indian country, and it's time for us to thrive. It's time for us to come on up for the rising. Come on now. Time to come up for the rising. Let's keep going in here. Whew. Whew. So trauma is more than that event. The event is over, but it becomes a lifestyle of anger, reaction, hypervigilance, and I'll talk about hypervigilance later, and self-medication. And you're going to find the more we dive in, the more all this stuff's just going to flow and make sense. So, like I said, let's call it overwhelm. I'll do my best to call it overwhelm instead of trauma. Because trauma is that scary thing beneath the bed. It's that thing I don't want anything to do with that. But what if it's overwhelm? We have tools to address overwhelm. And it's just really overwhelm stored in our body for the purpose of survival. There you go. Not crazy, not ruined, not broken. My body's trying to survive. And these responses are the way that it's trying to do it for me. So overwhelm is not released until we can feel safe again. Until we feel safe, that charge stays in us. But if we come from abusive environments, and then we stay in abusive environments, then we get into an abusive environment as adults, it's just never released because it believes it's necessary to survive. So it keeps perpetuating this sense of overwhelm. I don't think I shared this with this group. Tell me if I did, Annie, and I'll stop. But when I took with this group, when I took my son up to get his shots, did I talk to you guys about that? Doesn't ring a bell? Okay, so my son Parker, he's 12 now, and he's always been my little monkey. Gracie is 16 and she's pretty mellow, and Jack, he's 9, he's pretty mellow, but Parks is my monkey. Unfortunately, he's just like me. He looks just like me, acts just like me. He's got my nose, poor thing. He's got little skinny Indian legs, got no calves. And he used to jump from the chair to the footstool when I was living in Oklahoma. And then he pushed the footstool out, then he jumped. He's like 2 years old, little monkey. And he'd jump and jump and jump and jump. Push it out and jump. And that was what he did. And one time he came home from work and he was crying, and my wife Carminda was kind of standing over him, touching his shoulder. It must have just happened. I said, what happened? She said, Parks was jumping and he didn't make it. And she said, I think he hurt his shoulder. And so we're kind of checking it out. We get down to his wrist. And he goes like that. And I said, oh, I think he hurt his wrist. So we go over to the hospital there in Norman, Oklahoma. And they said he broke his wrist. And then the doctor said, Dad, will you hold down his arm to put the cast on? And I said, okay. And I hold his arm down, and Parks is just freaking out. Screaming, looking at me, what are you doing? Screaming. And then he stops and they get the cast on. He's just exhausted. And he had the cast on for about 6 weeks or so. But in that time, we moved here to New York, back home here. And I had to take him up to the doctor for a well child checkup after a while. So we're going in, and he had to get a shot. And the doctor said, Dad, can you hold him down? Same thing. And dude freaked out. Not the doctor, my son. Freaked out. He's screaming, kicking everything. He's sweating. And it took the doctor and me and 2 nurses to give my son a shot. And I was like, just let him have the mumps. I don't care. And so they finally give him the shot. Exhausted again. Long story short, we have to go back up again for something. I don't know where Carminda is during all my stories here. Maybe she's at Walmart. She's probably at Walmart. And so I'm driving, having to take back. As soon as we're on that road to the hospital, he starts screaming. No, I don't want to go. He's just screaming. I don't want to go. Like that. He's just red. He's just snot and the whole deal. And we pull in the parking lot, and he's just, I don't want to. Because he's fired and wired some things about this place. And I close the door, and I can hear him inside. When I go in there and I open the door, and he's like, wow, like that. 2.5 years old, 3 years old. And I said, you want to run? And he's like, what? And he jumps out of the truck, and we take off running. There's this long parking lot field type thing by the hospital. And we are just sprinting, me and him, 300 yards long. And we're just sprinting. I know the people on the 3rd floor are saying, what are the crazy Indians doing down there? And we're just sprinting. And after a while, he stops and he's like, and I said, you ready to go back? And he said, okay. We turn around. And he said, I don't want to go. I said, let's go. We take off again, take off running again. And we do this, and then this, and then this, and this. And by like our 5th time, I was ready to let's just go to the cardiac center in the hospital, So like, and so I said, "You ready to go?" He said, "Okay, let's go." So you go in, they had to give him a shot. And guess what? Nothing. Nothing. They gave him a shot. We've had shots since then. Nothing. Why, you ask? Good question. His body stored that for that purpose, to get rid of it. It needed him to survive. And his brain fired and wired, Dad, will you hold him down? With this sense of overwhelm, and they got paired together. And then the shot got paired together, then the clinic got paired together. So it was all this thing was paired together with this sense of overwhelm. And his body was waiting to get rid of it. And so when he got rid of it, it wasn't there anymore. It was used for what it was intended to be used for. Now, we may not have that. I'm daddy bear for my kids, so I knew what it was. So you may not have that opportunity with some of the folks you work with or the kids you work with, but we can make our kids stress hardy. We can trauma-proof our children. So let's dive into what was happening with him. Remember this guy here? Let's take a lap around the brain real quick. So make your hand like this and bring that here like that. Bring that down like that. This is basically your brain. And there's not a native brain and a non-native. There's not a fry bread center in the brain. It's just brain, okay? There's things that we express culturally differently, but that's an external thing. But the brain pretty much is going to be the same across every cultural group that around the world. So here's ours, okay? And yours is big. It's about 3 pounds. And there's a cut right down the middle. You've heard left brain and right brain. There's a cut right down the middle that helps the two sides talk to each other. I got another toy here. Hold on. Ah, here it is. So keep your hand like that, okay? So it's kind of like this, right there in the brain. There's your brain. So it'd be like that. But cut right down the middle, and kind of what it looks like on the inside. Okay. So right here where these two fingernails are, it's kind of a little bit like that. It's right here, right where your unibrow is. Right here. That's right there, 2 nails right there. That's right there. And that's your logic part of the brain, where you make decisions, you think things through, you think good cause and effect. If I do this, then this. You decided to wear that outfit today. You said, well, I gotta put something on. Maybe you're in your underwear or something, or your pajamas in the bottom, because we can only see the top up, but you thought that through. And I said, hey, I got that shirt at the office. I'll put that one on the office. That's that guy right there, thinking it through for you. Awesome. This guy right here, right behind this eye, helps me connect to you, helps you connect to me, helps you connect to your honey, helps you connect to your kids, to feel them, to know what they feel like. It's called the empathy center right here. Empathy is knowing, kind of relating to how other people feel. Let me pause there for a second. How Creator put us together. There are a quadrillion connections, at least. That's the most recent number. It keeps going up. At least a quadrillion connections in the brain. Quadrillion. I can't even wrap my brain around a quadrillion. I have like $7 in my wallet. A quadrillion. Imagine that. Okay. So this is all broad stroke stuff. So right here is right here. This helps me form my words. It's called Broca's region right here. It helps me form words. So the fact that I'm moving my mouth like this helps me form my words like that. That's that part of my brain helping me out there. And then right here, where's my brain? Right here, but on this side, helps me understand words. Helps me understand, like I was talking with Annie earlier and someone else is on and we were just kind of joking around. That's everything right there. Relationship, connecting, using words. It's awesome. Beautiful. Okay. Let's pop that open. And right here, this band right here, that's where we hold our emotional responses. Joy, sadness, anger. And look how these things are related. Here's my logic, and here's my anger right there. Look how close they're related. And this guy is all about my surviving, and this guy's all about my thriving, my thinking things through. Have you guys ever just gone off on someone? And then afterward, you're like, you get back in the car, and you're like, she didn't take my coupon. I'm in Walmart, and you're like, dang, I got to find another Walmart to go to. That's that guy right there. We'll argue for things. We'll get so mad, things we don't even really believe in or care about. That 5 cents off a roll of toilet paper, but you're arguing for it. And then this guy goes like this. In neurology, they call it flipping your lid. You guys ever flipped your lid and then just went off? And then afterward, you're like, dang, I can't go to that Walmart no more. I got to go to Pier for Walmart. So that's that guy right there. Emotional responses. Okay, pop that open. Pop that open. And feel right here behind your ear. Right there, where it goes up. It should go up. Unless you got cradle board head. You got cradle board head, it don't go up. But if it's kind of rounded right there, hold on, like the size of this bottle cap. That part of my brain, listen to this, holds memories of stress and trauma. That's its job. Don't try to take it out. We need it. It's why you're here today. It's why you're alive today. It's why I'm alive today. It's why we don't walk into traffic when a truck's coming, because that thing says, there's a truck coming. I know what that doesn't end well. It's why you don't walk into a pack of res dogs. They all got like mange and half an ear. And then this thing says, man, that ends poorly if you do this. So it pulls you back. And here's what's really cool, is this part of your brain that I'm describing right now, listen to this, works about 10 times faster than this logic part of your brain, the thinking it through part of your brain. You know why? Because this guy's trying to keep you alive. And if I'm walking out to the road here and a truck's coming, I don't have a whole lot of time to think it through. So this part of my brain pulls me back off the road real fast. And as I come over here, then this comes in, and I thought, oh, I almost got hit by that truck. That would have been bad, because then I have a chance to think about it. Sometimes when this is swollen, though, we act impulsively. We get angry big. We get angry fast. And we'll talk more about that in our second lap. Okay, let's pop this open now. Now right here, so if my brain's in my head like this, right here is how my brain talks to my body. This is my brain stem and my spinal cord. This is how all this information comes from here, and it comes from here. Now watch, I'll pinch my hand. Ow. How do I know that hurts? Because it comes here, then there's a thing called a thalamus. And it says, I got some information for you. And then it sends it to my brain. That's how I know that hurts. So the thalamus, that part of your brain, is the gatekeeper. It takes all the information your body's getting, sends it up here, and then sends it to the brain to say, here's the information I'm getting. What do we do about this? Okay? It's useful. It's awesome. We'll take another lap and come back to that later. And right here in the middle is, it's called the hippocampus. And that part of your brain is really to make long-term memories. Like when you think back, you're using this guy right here. And this conversation right now, this doesn't even qualify for memory, because we're still in the middle of it, for crying out loud. But how a memory happens is an event starts. We started 45 minutes ago. An event happens. It's happening right now. And then an event ends. Then it's over. And the fact that it's over qualifies it to be a memory. If it were still happening, it wouldn't qualify to be a memory, because it's still happening. So like this conversation now, it won't be a memory. And things are going to happen between now and when you fall asleep tonight. And your honey's going to say, were you on that webinar thing today? What'd you guys talk about? And it's going to get foggier and foggier and foggier, because other things are going to happen between now and when you fall asleep. And you'll say something like, you talk about res dogs. and mange. I think it was about that. Because things is going to get cloudy. And then when you fall asleep tonight, listen to this. When you fall asleep tonight is when this conversation and everything that happened today is going to start coming together for you, going to get filed away into your brain. And usually about 2 to 4 hours of sleep, it'll start filing things away for you. Make sure that you have this memory in your brain somewhere. So then a week from now, I'll say, were you on that call? And you say, yeah. What? Then I'll say, I remember this about it. That's what that guy does right there. Okay, now let's introduce trauma or overwhelm. Car accidents, any list of abuses, those kind of things. Let's say a little boy comes home and sees his parents fighting. And he has 3 options. He could run away, he could fight, or he could freeze. And so we know on this call today that trauma is in the freeze. It's in the inability to move or escape. Sometimes that's happening like during a car accident. Car accident is just chaos. It's just, there's no way to leave it. Or physical abuses or sexual abuses, there's no way to escape, so the body freezes. So here's what happens during that. And that's where this jolt gets stored in us. So this little boy, let's say he's 7 years old. He sees mom and dad fighting. He comes home from school and fight. He's going to fight dad? Nope, that's dad. He's a big guy and it's dad. So fight's off the table. Flight. Am I going to run away from mom? Nope. So flight's off the table. Freeze. So his body gets jacked up like he's running or fighting, but he's doing nothing. The inability to use, hear this phrase now, the inability to use this jolt for what it was intended to be used for. During abuses, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, a car accident, being beaten, things like this, that we don't have the chance to get rid of that jolt. We don't use it up. It gets stored in the body. And you hear me say this? So it has the opportunity to finish. It gets stored because it says, this is a big deal and I'm going to need to protect you. This is a big deal. I'm going to keep you alive. And that's the same thing with, and I told you about Parks because it was stored in him until he finished. He used it for what it was intended to be used for, and then he was done with it. The body was done with it. We can think I'm done with it, but that's not where it lives. Remember, thinking's way up here. What I'm describing is way back here, and that's miles and miles away brain-wise. So thinking my way through it is pretty ineffective because if we could have thought our way out of it, we would have by now. There's a lot of smart people in our country, in Indian country, who have a lot of traumas and stresses. And if they could have thought their way out of it, they would have by now. But come to find out, it doesn't live in the thinking part of the brain. It lives in the survival centers of the brain. The tool has to match the event. And once the tools start to match, we start healing, not just dealing. We start healing. But let's look at the physiology of what's happening. You have a question, Eddie?
I just wanted to leave enough time if people had questions for that too.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just do like 5 more minutes. And then maybe I'll take the second lap next time around. Okay.
Awesome.
So what I really want to lay down to make sure that we get this is that anxiety attack, that anger, that depression, that behavior problem, that ADHD is just the brain trying to survive. And it's just an electrical charge. And I'm going to give you a quick tool before we even finish here. So I do a lot of work in this area. I see a lot of folks. It's pretty much 99% of what I see. And the most simple tool is already a tool we use. You're already breathing. You're breathing right now, for crying out loud. Most of you have been breathing the whole time we've been talking. Okay? And I call it flute breathing. So when I play flute, I don't blow. Well, I blow. When you blow it, there's no control. When I play flute, I breathe. I'm just breathing like this. I'm not blowing. That's just breathing and moving my fingers. So when I work with anybody, we talk about flute breathing because it's about a 3-count in breath and about a 7-count exhale. Now do it again. Then I'll do it again. So here's what we know about breathing. Let me pause there for a second. You're going to find that so many of the tools to heal the body, we already have. They're already in us. Creator already gave them to us. So it doesn't have to be about chemistry. Your trauma healing is most likely not going to be found at the pharmacy. And it's not going to be found at the liquor store. You have all these internal tools that you're already doing. We just got to make them work for us. Okay? We got to start leaning into it a little bit more, getting to know it a little bit more. Foundationally, breathing. So, and you probably heard this before, but I like to know like how things work. So when you inhale through your nose, you ever smell something and it just brings back all sorts of memories? How does that work, crying out loud? How does my nose connect to that stuff? So that part of your brain, the olfactory, it just lights up so many different parts of your brain. Like you can walk into a school and think, oh, that's what my elementary school smelled like when I was a kid. And then you can think about your buddies when you're in 3rd grade because it all rushes back when you have an inhale. Because when you inhale, it lights up so many parts of your brain. And one of the parts of the brain that lights up is the part of your brain that gets you all jacked up and excited. It does this, and it gets you like that. So you're lighting that part of your brain up. So here's what happens when you're doing an inhale. Let me say this again. Your body's trying to heal. It's trying to do the work for you. Let's quit fighting it. Your body's trying to heal. So when you inhale like that, there's things in your neck called baroreceptors. And it measures your blood pressure. It knows if you're like this or not. Then it knows if it needs to lower that. Your body's trying to help you already. So it lights up that part of the brain, the excited part of the brain, and measures the blood pressure. So 3 counts in to let it do the work, pause, and then 7 counts out. Relax your shoulders. Here's what's happening. The other part of the brain, the calm part of your brain, kicks in. It's doing this while you're exhaling, the calming part of your brain. And listen to this. Something called, doggone it, acetylcholine. A chemical is released to slow your heart rate. So listen to all that's happening. Your body's getting all these messages, and then you're telling it, slow the game down. Slow the game down. And here's what I always tell my patients is you are no longer toolless. You are not defenseless against this gurgling sense of overwhelm. You just have to train the brain, train the body. This is just our very first tool. We're going to have a bunch of cool things happen in our time together. This is just our very first thing. So here's what I want us to do. Let's practice flute breathing. So I'm going to inhale. Oh, let me stop for a second. The magic number is 6 or 7 times. When there's something called heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is our hearts have different beats. The beats of our heart vary every time it beats. And there's been a lot of research that found that people who don't have a lot of variability in their heart rates, they have more disease, from physical diseases like diabetes and heart disease and cancers to anxiety, depression. So the more you practice this, the more you create this variability in your heart, you can actually start having defenses in your body as well, in good ways. Help your body help you, even against trauma. So here's what it looks like. I'll just play. As long as you hear the flute note, be exhaling. When you hear me inhale the flute, relax your shoulders, pause, and just, we're creating heart rate variability. We're setting up the parasympathetic part of the brain. We're releasing acetylcholine to the heart. It's healing. Are you ready? Inhale. Exhale real slow. Inhale. 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 Inhale, relax your shoulders. Now do nothing for a second. And why I say do nothing for a second is because this part of the part of your brain that calms you, it doesn't pop back, it blooms back. So there's not a right or wrong tempo. Your body has this tempo, and you're trying to teach it something good, something healthy, something well. Practice this, and what I tell folks I work with, practice this 10 times a day. The more we dive in, the more I'll say, what's the first thing that happens that you feel like a stress or anxiety or a trauma is trying to creep up on you? Where's the first place you feel it? And then I'll say, breathe that down. Because what it's trying to do is get your attention, and really the brain's saying, you got my attention, but you're not doing what I want you to do. So you can refire that. Practice 10 times a day, 10 times a day. We're going to keep diving in. We'll take the second lap around the brain. And we'll always do more tools. And some of them seem kind of fun and silly, but they work. I wouldn't waste your time. We can't, in healing our communities, we just can't waste time. Does anybody have questions or comments or thoughts before we have to go?
No questions? No thoughts? Philip, I know you have thoughts.
Do you have anything you want to add, Annie?
Don't. The thing that struck me when you were speaking was that there's I teach meditation. I think you knew that. And we've been doing meditation 101 and extended meditation, and I've probably been meditating for as long as I've been sober, or actually longer than that. So more than 35 years I've been meditating. And finally, science has come out with this. I think it was out of Boston, Mass, that they came out with this response. What was it called? Relaxation response. And it's the scientific model that proves that you can reduce your blood pressure, high blood pressure. They can take people that have been on high blood pressure medicine for decades. And through relaxation response, that you eventually, oftentimes people can get off that blood pressure medicine, because the preponderance of blood pressure, unless it's genetic, is most of the time related to stress, almost always related to some type of stress response.
They found the same thing with PTSD.
Yep.
So
Same
yeah,
thing with diabetes. They have a whole study going on with relaxation response. So basic meditation and addressing diabetes, right? Just
oh,
as
that
you
makes
talked
sense.
about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? So it's, and we think that it's got to be a great big thing. We think that it has to be a silver bullet. We think it has to be this extraordinary effort. And the irony is, it's not. It's these little things that we can do every day, little teeny tiny things, truly little teeny tiny things, right? Like a
Right.
water ceremony can take, a couple minutes. The breathing takes just a few moments throughout the day. And it makes
Absolutely.
such a huge difference in our lives.
I'm totally into that. I totally agree with you. We've made trauma work much harder than it has to be because the trauma itself feels so big.
Yeah.
But we can find ways to decrease the size of it and its intensity and ultimately the meaning it has in our lives. So thank you everyone for joining. And I'll be here next week.
In the chat, Patty Eagle Bowl said to thank you very much for the valuable information. And Jerry LeBeau said, thank you very much, Dr. Tonemah and Patty, for beautiful healing prayer. It's very helpful to know that we already have the tools to use.
I do have a question that, Darryl, when dealing, especially now during the pandemic, we've all lost so many family members and we're dealing with children and adults alike that are in mourning. Do you have any advice for, it's traumatic because it's many of our elders that we're losing. How would you approach that with this particular tool that you've given us?
Well, a couple things. First is mourn in a culturally appropriate way. Mourn the way that you can, even with limitations. We've lost a lot of folks on our res here as well. But mourn in a way that is consistent with your beliefs and how the Lakota may mourn. For what this is I have to be well to provide safety for my children in their mourning. So I do the things that help me personally with my mourning. If it's prayerfulness, sometimes it's activity, sometimes it's movement. But and you probably know this as a parent or a grandparent, that I want to make sure my kids are okay too. And the best way for me to make sure my kids are okay is me being okay. And so if I can do it more in a good way for myself, I can be safer. I can be a safe spot for my kids and for my family. And then that trickles out to the community. So making sure you're okay, mourning in the way that the best way you can during COVID season, and creating safety for your kids and for your home is. Somebody says the vagus nerve is the superhighway to health. Yes, we're going to talk about the vagus nerve at some point. We might need 10 more sessions, but I'm down. If you can keep coming, I will be here. So that would be what I say.